Take a look at these tea leaves. You might find something a little bit unusual about them. Usually tea would be using tea leaves. However, this one, it actually uses the stems of the leaves. You can see the yellow-green streaks. This is called a kukicha. And kukicha has some unusual benefits about them that you might not know about. So today, we're going to talk about kukicha. Hi, I'm Yuki. I'm the founder of Tea Life, and here we break down Japanese tea so you can become a Japanese tea expert. Kukicha is the name of a Japanese green tea that's made primarily from the stems of the tea plant. The name kukicha kind of explains this quite clearly. Kuki means stems and cha means tea, so kukicha means stem tea. Now when you look at the tea leaves, it's quite different from a sencha, where a normal sencha you would mostly see the tea leaves. However, the kukicha, you see the pale white streaks, and those are the stems. And usually those are mixed in with a fair amount of tea leaf material as well, and that constitutes the kukicha. Because of this appearance in English, it's sometimes translated to twig tea. However, in reality, it's actually not twigs, it's usually stems that they use for the tea. One of the difficult things about kukicha is actually its name. You might have heard Karigane or Shiraore or Bocha. These are all different names of the same, or with different nuances, but the same stem tea. We're going to go into the names a little bit later, but nonetheless, these are all names of the tea that are made primarily from the stem portion of the tea plant. One of the interesting things about kukicha is that it's actually not made per se, it's more like a byproduct of the manufacturing process of Sencha or Gyokuro. So let's talk about the manufacturing process a little bit for Sencha and Gyokuro. After the tea leaves are harvested, then they're steamed, they're rolled, they're dried, and then the base aracha, the raw tea, if you will, is created for the Sencha and Gyokuro. And then after that, those tea leaves are sent to the finishing process. And at the finishing process, this is where the tea leaves are sorted and refined. In that sorting process, that's where they separate out the tea leaves from the stems. Now the process is actually quite cool. If you love machines and factories, and if you have a chance to see this work, then I think you'll quite love it. They have different machines depending on the factory, but sometimes they would use a sift to sift different particles out. Sometimes they would have controlled airflow to move the lighter stems in a different way to sort them out. And then the more modern types, they would have optical sorters where they identify the stems based on color, and they would like flick off the stems using air pressure, which is really cool as well. But nonetheless, that's how they sort out the stems, and gradually the stems will accumulate in one pile. And then that would be used as a different type of tea, and that's the kukicha. Now let's talk about the taste of kukicha. One of the things that really fascinates me is that there is a material difference between the taste of a kukicha and the leaf portion of the tea tree. And this is due to the chemical composition. So for example, the stem, it actually has less caffeine, and some studies say that there's about half caffeine content compared to the blades. They also have less catechin as well. And as you may know, the caffeine and the catechin, these contribute to the astringency and the bitterness of the tea. Now, on the other hand, the stems are said to have higher amounts of certain types of amino acid compared to the leaves. And the amino acids, these contribute to the umami and the sweetness of the tea. So naturally, the stems of the tea leaves, they have higher umami, sweetness, lower astringency and bitterness compared to the leaf part of the tea. So they taste different in that sense. What's also interesting is that there's studies that look at the aromatic compounds as well. And when they look at the stems compared to the other parts of the tea tree, they have different volatile aromatic compounds that contribute to the fresh, sweet, light smell, the aroma that you get from the stems. So not just the taste, but the aroma is very different for the kukicha. So what I often tell my customers is that if you're always drinking Sencha or Gyokuro, and if you want to mix it up a little bit, Kukicha is a really good place to go because it's vastly different in taste from the other two types of tea. Now let's talk about the names of this tea, because there's lots of varieties in which they're called. Probably the most common general terms are the Kukicha and the Bocha. So these are both interchangeable, the same meaning. Bocha, bo means stick. So You can tell that they're basically talking about the same thing. The differences are mostly regional, so I would say that most of the areas they would use Kukicha, but certain areas such as Ishikawa Prefecture, they would use the word Bocha. And again, they're basically the same meaning. And then there's the names Shiraore and Karigane. These might be names you've heard of before as well. And these are more poetic terms, if you will. So Shiraore means white stems, and Karigane means, this is also an interesting term. It's like the sound of wild geese. So again, very poetic. And these are terms used more for higher quality stem teas. So what do I mean by higher quality? They're usually stem teas that are coming from shaded tea. So Gyokuro tea or Kabusecha tea, these are shaded before harvesting, and that increases the umami and the sweetness, which is considered a higher quality tea. So those stems would be also higher in umami and sweetness. So the stems that are coming from those, when those are used, they tend to be named Karigane and Shiraore more often, and those are higher quality stem teas. However, this naming convention, from my experience, it's not definite as well. There's a lot of blur. So you might find like normal stem tea also using the name Shiraore or Karigane. So it's not 100%, but just sharing that there's lots of different ways to call this stem tea, and often the precise definitions are quite blurred. Another important thing to note is that the Kukicha is often roasted, creating what's called the Kuki houjicha or the Karigane houjicha. So because they're roasted, they become a type of houjicha, a roasted green tea. Now you actually may see these roasted types of Kukicha more often than the normal Kukicha, especially if you're outside of Japan. Now stems are thicker obviously compared to the leaves, so they can withstand higher temperature when they're being roasted. And by doing so, they are able to emit more pleasant aromatics when they become houjicha. So in general, it's said that the Kuki houjicha is a higher quality houjicha compared to just roasting normal tea leaves. A famous example is the Kagabocha or the Kagabo houjicha from the Ishikawa Prefecture. These are premium grade houjicha that are mainly using, or 100% using, the stems of the tea leaves. So just be careful when you look for Kukicha. Even though the label might say Kukicha, it might actually be a houjicha type. It might be a roasted type, which is also a magnificent type of tea, so there's nothing wrong with that, but they're significantly different in terms of the taste and the profile compared to the normal green type of Kukicha. So that's an important thing to take note of. So that's a quick overview of Kukicha. I hope that helps. I hope that's interesting. If you want to learn more about Japanese green tea, please do subscribe to the channel, and please go down to the comments and subscribe to our free newsletter where we talk about Japanese tea every week.